Hey, hey, hey. It's 11100 crew here for the Level 100 show on Good Friday. How's everybody doing out there?
Doing all right, doing all right. Just
Yeah,
looking at my holdings, my hodls, my paper-handed self when it comes to altcoins, all those fun things.
And I'm doing pretty well myself. Just excited about everything that lies ahead.
that's good to hear. It is exciting times, isn't it? It's a good time to be alive, good time to be an ambassador for technology and education and the good use of technology out there. Do you guys hear about Bankman? What's his name?
Sam Bankman-Fried, SBF.
Freed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a
Sentenced.
sinister name. He sounds like a super villain.
He is a supervillain.
He's not a very trustworthy guy, is he?
No,
It
what
could
was it?
definitely have gone better.
Hold on.
20
So it's
years
yeah, in 11 billion.
in restitution.
Yeah,
Paid back to who?
to the people he defrauded, like Tom Brady.
Oh man,
Wow.
I mean, it's big. It's like
that
everybody was in
hurts.
on it.
Did Bernie Madoff have to pay restitution?
He did, but he was unalived.
Yeah,
Well, indeed.
yeah. His son, though, I think his son had to pay that back. I don't know.
Typically the debt dies with you of that nature.
Yeah, that sounds if the son were made to pay it, that sounds suspiciously close to like attainder,
Yep.
which I am told we don't have in America.
On Front Street we don't.
Yeah, it's true.
But yeah,
Good luck.
11 billion. Or good, sorry.
I started to make a joke, but we are live, so perhaps not.
Yeah, there's the wheels on the bus come round and round until they fall off. So I'll try to I will be the voice of reason here this afternoon. How about that for once?
Wow, if you pull this off, I'll be really impressed.
Yeah, fine by me. I don't. I don't seem very reasonable.
So I mean, this is a case that's been in the works for a couple years, and ultimately, this is one of the talking points during COVID times of kind of the fact that there may have been some shenanigans, especially given his rise to prominence and how quickly it happened, effectively, on the backs of for lack of a better term, the high profile ultra net worth investors that he was able to corral and invest in FTX. I mean, literally, like this article I'm reading has just AP News, the Associated Press, not my personal favorite news source, but it is a news source of some merit at times. And in this case, for simple things like the sentencing, I'm here and it has yeah, that's where I got that. But like Tom Brady, Steph Curry, who else? Larry David. I mean, the list goes on and on of like people we know and have been entertained by that are in pop culture or in sports or in business that were effectively
Wow.
defrauded out of
They were
thousands, if
duped.
not millions.
I mean, this should not be the first time in recent memory for any of us that you had a bunch of public figures get connected to what seemed to be a novel play in an industry that wasn't their primary, and they got out over their skis and got ripped off. Uh, can anybody name the other?
I mean, which one? There've been a few.
Enron.
Well, I was thinking of Theranos, but yeah,
Oh,
that one works
Theranos.
too.
Oh,
Yeah,
Theranos. Yeah.
yeah.
What's
Goodness.
her name?
That's what. Oh,
Elizabeth Holmes.
yes.
Elizabeth Holmes.
Uh,
Yeah, she was a
That was
at
another
least.
major, huge defraudment there. Got a lot of money.
Yeah, she more or less was able to pin that one on Sonny, who I forget Sonny's last name, but
yeah.
I'm thinking
Well,
Firefest.
oh yeah, that one works
Fire
too.
Festival.
And
that's pretty bad.
us
Yeah.
millennials, yeah. Hey, Ja Rule is back. I remember him. Yeah, this will be good.
Yeah. I'll pay $10,000 for a cheese sandwich and water in my barracks.
Gives new meaning to holla holla anybody who's ready to get dollars.
Right? Trick Daddy is like sugar water and mayonnaise sandwich.
Yeah, definitely. And it honestly, it's so weird because all of these people turn out to be more or less just regular people, unless they're within that narrow band of expertise. And in a lot of these industries that we know them from, it kind of takes that to get to the top. But then again, I'm reminded of a scene in The Wire where the lawyer, Maurice, what's his name, is describing to Marlowe, what happened in prior seasons with Stringer. And he's like, yeah, once you get them away from their payloads, you can just bleed them. And it's like the most sinister thing, but it absolutely applies here. And in the case of Elizabeth Holmes, and I don't know Beckman Fried's case as well, but the idea that the Emperor's New Clothes got sold basically on the premise of her doing a weird Steve Jobs cosplay and then giving people the Adam Levine Maroon 5 penance stare. And it worked. It worked on like people as, otherwise serious as James Mattis.
Yeah, multiple
So,
venture capitalists. So one resource I'll interject with here for the group, or for those that Coin or not Coinbase. Well, I guess Coinbase, yeah, one of the few exchanges remaining since FTX went under. For those who are old enough in the crypto game, you may also remember Silk Road.
Yep.
That
oh,
was
I do.
definitely so I mean, I guess the other piece related to Theranos and other startups would be to go to Crunchbase. So that's what I
Yep.
wanted to interject is that Crunchbase.com is a great resource for researching startups, especially
Yep.
startups of any note, so that you could look at the founders, you could look at the interest, the high-ranking executives, who's actually funding them. And so in the cases of some of these names that we're talking about right now, you can get up to speed pretty quickly on Crunchbase for free who these companies are, who these people are, and how well they're connected to be able to raise the kind of money. I mean, we're talking about billions, especially in the case of Theranos or FTX.
Right. And unlike Petey Pablo and Seagram's Gin, we were not getting paid for that. Crunchbase is actually pretty good. So
Yeah,
and I think another thing that is absolutely worth calling out is the insularity and the group think and the herd mentality of this kind of thing. Once you have one person on board, you're much closer to the next one than you were from 0 to 1.
yep, that's a key tenet of the Ponzi scheme.
Indeed.
That's that's basically required. I mean, that's the other reference we made to Bernie Madoff and his Ponzi scheme that eventually was kind of recognized and led to some other sequences of events that are outside the scope of today's call. So
Yeah.
summary or good, Wes?
Well, I was always going to say it's funny how these people get caught, right? There's usually a tipster, or they go a long time doing what they're doing. And I always find that amazing, right? Is that they're
Mm.
even able to commit these crimes in the first place, right? And I think it goes to show how much money transacts at any given second. And this kind of goes back to what we've talked about in past sessions is the inherent beauty of the crypto coin system with using ledgers and whatnot, right? Where um, there's an opportunity to launder money through a lot of traditional business means, and it's illegal, right? And there are times when you can mitigate even playing around with risky money if you do a transaction with a digital exchange, right? I think it's mind-boggling that they were doing transactions on the size that they were, right? And maybe some of that money that touched FTX was dirty money too. We're like talking about foreign nations that potentially could have changed their money into different digital assets. A lot of crazy stuff could potentially happen. Something I find amazing is how Crypto Arena still has a contract, right? Like, it seemed to me like there was a big wave around crypto about almost 2 years ago, like when Crypto Arena came out, and like you said, all these big celebrities were jumping on that bandwagon, like Brady and Curry and stuff like that. But after the shadiness happened, right, there was this period of some really shady characters kind of came to the forefront of that and defrauded a bunch of people. That knocked down the uh, consumer sentiment, if you will, but people actually
Mhm.
consuming it. It got a bad reputation as like not necessarily a very legal means of doing business, and now you see it coming back again, like resurging with Bitcoin. People want back in that train, so it goes to show
Uh,
that even with bad press, you can recover as an industry, right? If it's a strong industry, I think it goes to show the strength. It's here to stay, right? If people like uh, Bankman can pull off his name always kills me. If
yeah, well, be careful about that. I don't want to have to reference a certain meme from American Psycho.
oh, I don't.
I'm not going to
I
say
know the
which one
movie. I
because
know the movie, but I don't know the meme. I think there's a bunch of them, but I'm sensing it's not appropriate.
it's not.
Okay.
But
uh,
it's funny you
Go ahead.
should
Yeah.
mention Crypto.com Arena because we can remember a time when the Houston Astros used to play on Enron Field.
yeah.
And if we go back further,
Fraud, fraud, fraud.
yeah, the Raiders until they left for better pastures were playing in a O.Co Coliseum. And it's like, when the last time you bought anything off of Overstock.com? Because it's been a while for me.
People still do it, just
Yeah.
not nearly as they're on to whatever the newest fad website is or exchange
Mm.
place or whatnot.
I want to
Well,
say Wayfair kind of stole
Wayfair's
some.
one. Yeah.
Wayfair
I,
kind of stole some
I'm sure we'll
Overstock's.
be seeing a Timu Field soon enough.
Oh, Timu. Yeah, they're
Timu
everybody's
Field.
shop like a billionaire.
Oh man, Timo's
Yikes.
garbage.
Oh, it's basically it's TikTok for shopping addicts instead of social media addicts.
I've
There's
had to.
yeah, are good.
I was gonna say I've unfollowed that ad on YouTube at least 5 times, and it still keeps coming back. And it's like, do not show me this content.
It'd be like that.
Oh yeah, they're gonna jam it down your throat one way or another
Oh,
on YouTube,
Mm,
pop it up in your Google Workspace, just all kind of nastiness.
yep.
oh dear.
Reminds me of that episode of The Simpsons where, the music video has a subliminal message for Navy recruitment. You remember that one?
No, I missed that
And
one.
okay, well, yeah, I'll have to throw a link in the chat or something. But Bart figures it out, and then they're like, "What do you mean you're doing this?" And it's like, "Well, the Navy uses a lot of ways to recruit people. There's subliminal, liminal, and superliminal." And he's like, "Superliminal," and he opens the window, sees Lenny going by, and is like, "Hey, you join the Navy." And he's like, "That's a good idea." So I don't know. I'm eagerly awaiting the return of like town criers.
They're out there. They're just called influencers.
Yeah, pretty much.
No,
And they cry too much.
but they do. And one of the things they're crying about is
Indeed.
the recent pullback in Bitcoin after reaching new all-time highs.
Where's
Thoughts
it at
there?
now?
Well, let's because things are very volatile. We should take a,
Yeah, take a
so
snap. Take a look.
well, for I guess for our learners there are several ways that you can get access to this type of information. So my personal favorite is I like Google Finance. Speaking of our Google overlords and all the apps they give to us, but I also, you know, in fairness, have given them many things and also take many things. Well, I haven't taken anything. I don't steal from them or anyone for that matter. Um, but the point I'm making is that Google, I have a watch list, and in that watch list is Bitcoin. And so Bitcoin today is at 69,000. So it's still off its all-time high, but it's still within striking distance of 73 135, which was hit back on March 13th. So it went through a rough period for about a week and a half, and then this week made a very strong rally from 63,998 up to 70,735. So I guess I could share my screen there to. I don't know how that's going to show, but we'll go
It'll
further
look
more.
good. Go
All
for
right.
it.
I'll just give that this is something for for those that are looking, this is another, like I mentioned, google.com/finance, for Google Finance. And, so here's Bitcoin to the US dollar. And so when I just look at this chart, obviously they color code it for you. So, it didn't have a good day today. It was down, $934. But you go back 5 days, they're up almost 4% this week. And then if I go back to a month, we're still up 14% over the month. So this is a very volatile, asset class that has these types of moves. And so we're up, 160% in 6 months. And then in the last year, basically that same 150. And then obviously since 5-year chart is up 1200%. So what we're looking at here is and you can see it by the graph, is a very volatile, fast moving asset that people are interested in and can see as the first quote unquote stable coin, which has been adopted more by the market, as I'll call it, as opposed to, traditional, banks and governments and whatnot. So, um,
Mm.
a top level thread to all this related to, our topic today of crypto, and the exchanges or whatnot. Because what's interesting is the juxtaposition between, the Silk Roads, the crypto.coms, and, all these other exchanges, and the fact that, like, we also have other things like, the ETFs that were now allowed for Bitcoin, for the retirement accounts now allowing you to invest your 401ks into Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. And you see, the large financial institutions getting into cryptocurrencies. So there's a lot of just competing signals, if you will, on the positive side and the negative side. So I wanted to get your guys' take on the current situation related to Bitcoin, the altcoins, or crypto in general.
Uh, I'm going to see it the same way that I saw it before. Is and if you could stop sharing real quick, that'd be great.
Oh, sorry about that.
It's okay. Um, I've looked at crypto as just kind of fun money. I've never looked at it too seriously. I honestly started mining again after one of our last conversations. So, I sold out quite a while ago, but I was using it to buy video games. Honestly, I used an exchange, Lightning wallet. It was like, or no, Satoshi's wallet is what I was using, and
Mhm.
it went right into, like, I had a mining rig in my garage, and I was actually, my rent included electricity at the time. So I was basically just getting free money, and I would take that money right into an exchange and buy video games with it. And so it was like free video games. So I thought it was cool. I thought it was really cool. Um, but I just want to be kind of participate. It's kind of the same thing with the GameStop Diamond Hand stuff, when all that was going on. I felt like I just wanted to be part of the excitement. Really, I wasn't looking for any kind of get rich. I just want to be knowledgeable about it so I could, be in on the excitement. Really, is how I looked at it. Is how I looked at it.
Alex, or
Well, I mean, I don't have the degree of familiarity with cryptocurrency that I would like to. Um, what occurs to me though is people have a lot of hopes for what the cryptocurrency paradigm can mean for monetary policy. Um, the idea of the method of account being distributed and irreducible and decentralized appeals to people who are aware of the historical issues that have arisen with currencies issued by governments. And I know that at the same time, though, I do wonder if there are not, if not advantages, then just standards and practices which have evolved for those currencies and their attendant governments that don't exist with a lot of these cryptocurrencies. And that does leave it, um, well, what I'll say is that there are accepted and conventional ways to trade between currencies issued by nations, and there are, procedures for if you think something is overvalued or undervalued, and everybody kind of knows what to expect. And yes, there's some group psychology that goes into it, but there's also a lot of technical analysis. And I don't, this might be my ignorance, but I don't know if the same sort of technical markers exist and therefore the same uh evolution of procedure. And I think that's why a lot of that volatility is there. It's like I remember reading an article on a blog called Epsilon Theory talking about how the writer of that blog in college played a lot of poker. You'll appreciate this, Iskia. And slowly but surely uh tweaked his weekly poker game that he hosted to introduce new rules and volatility and things of that nature. But it was so that he could slowly but surely make himself more likely to win at the expense of his friends and partners. And I look at something like Bitcoin that hasn't been around enough to be fully understood, and I wonder if you know, if you can't spot the fish at the table, you're the fish applies.
Oh, 100%, especially considering, I mean, not only, something as stable as, I mean, well, sorry, so not something as volatile as Bitcoin, but we can look at arbitrage or, volatility or in other asset classes, whether it's the actual currencies themselves of like the US dollar or, euro or British pound. I mean, there's fluctuations and valuations there, and there's that's a whole industry in and of itself, or the price of real estate or the value of a business or the price of the goods and things we buy day to day, from like gas to food to anything else. So I think there's always it really underpins is that really three things. So one is that there's always going to be that piece of the buyer and the seller, and that creates a market. And so ultimately, what we're seeing here is that there's substantial support for an alternative method of transferring goods and services using cryptocurrency, in this case Bitcoin or others, as the medium to do so, and provide proof of work and possibly proof of value. The second piece I'll draw is that, yeah, there's a lot of just there's a lot of unknowns. Like I definitely don't know everything about crypto and blockchain or even specific coins, but like a lot of things in life, I just jumped right in, bought Bitcoin and a lot of other altcoins, and then eventually sold them all about 3 years ago. Um, just realizing like this just was, one, I lost money. I'll just be honest about it.
Yeah.
you know, so
What inspired you, right? Did you think you were going to make a profit?
yeah, I thought I was
Did
going to
you
make a
see a
ton of
trend?
money.
Okay.
you know and so that's actually a good dovetail into the third point, is that in a free market capitalistic society, we are incentivized to go make money. you know
Well, sure. And I think at level 100, we want to help our future have access to that money, right? If there's knowledge barrier around how crypto works, and again, I'll go back to this thing. It's like maybe someday you'll get a paycheck in crypto, right? Like let's say some currencies, some government currencies fail out there, and crypto is one of the last remaining currencies for people to transact business in some dystopian future world. But hey, I don't know. I mean, I think it could happen where people are not necessarily incentivized, but forced to use a certain currency method. And we would be doing a disservice to our future generations if we didn't at least give them informative knowledge how to obtain, maintain, invest, and be able to understand the volatility of these markets, right? Like if you train, you give somebody 30 bitcoins and you say, here you go, and you don't tell them that those Bitcoins could be worth nothing the next
Mhm.
day, you didn't do you didn't educate that person at the risk involved with that particular tender. And so, yeah, like you don't know Askia. I can appreciate that, but you have experience with it that you could pass on, right? Like you just said, like you lost money on it. Like that's worth sharing with people, future
Sure.
generations. I didn't lose any money, but I didn't put any money in. I was um
Well, you paid for your miner, didn't you?
yeah, but I didn't pay for it for that specific reason. I didn't buy a purpose. It was my gaming rig, like I got my enjoyment out of it from playing PC games on it. That's what I invested in it for. But it just so happens um, that it could pay for itself just by uh, mining digital gold, if you will. And I thought that was really cool. I also felt that I came into the crypto arena at the wrong time. There was a guy in one of my wireless network trainings who inspired me. He said, "I got a room full of these video cards that are just mining all day long, and I've bought properties. He told me I need to look into it and get into it. He inspired me, and he's like, I buy all these cards at wholesale prices, these video cards, and I just have a room full of them. I've actually built the same people who build grow rooms,
Yep.
cannabis grow rooms, built him a self-contained mining vessel, if you will.
Mhm.
And I was intrigued by that. It inspired me. And he was way further along, but I said, hey, I got some equipment. Let me see what I can do. But those days are not what they were, right? There's other ways of earning cryptocurrency, like proof of work, um, versus proof of value, right? And proof of work is the actual mining, right? The solving of the problems, the math equations, and the proof of value is trading for. Can you explain that, Askia? Can you wrap your head around that concept, because that has eluded me for quite a while? Is this next evolution, and basically it has to do with if you use any of the technology. And this is how I can best explain it, is if you use Ethereum or any of the coins associated with proof of work and you transact, you get credit for transacting.
Yeah, that's
Basically,
the
you get
yeah, it's the I mean, there's still, gas effect, or cost associated with exchanging using digital means.
yes.
And so that's that gas, so to speak, that's what led me into the altcoin, trading is, so whether it was literally helium, pun intended, because that is a gas in a
Yeah.
periodic table, but it was also a means, it still is a cryptocurrency that was tied to effectively using wireless networks to help with telemetry. Like, this is where you are in the physical world. And so UPS had actually adopted helium, to
Hmm.
help with tracking, real time deliveries, and also to just for telemetry of the drivers and the trucks, so that they could keep better, track of what's going on in real time, and effectively use it as a scorekeeping system for rating driver delivery performance.
I relate it back to, remember when PlayStation did the folding at home, where they had you had to opt into this program, but basically it had a network of PlayStations 3s that allowed them to map the human genome because it was this
Mhm.
collective brain, right? Like I think those were
Mm.
some of the first, maybe the genesis of some of these cryptography, crypto system of a group of computers working together in tandem to solve a problem, kind of on their own, without human interaction, right? And then putting a value on that. Like, I think that's kind of poetic, right? Is like the value on the work that those PlayStation 3s were doing was the human value, right? Because it was help solving, advanced forms of cancer and other things where they were trying to progress medical science, and they used the CPU power of these PlayStation 3s. Um, but that distributed compute model is very much like has some roots in cryptography, you know?
Yeah, so specific to
Yeah,
that
for sure.
PlayStation 3 piece, it's important contextually and historically to so the first application was multi-parallel processing, um,
Hmm.
before those PlayStation 3. So that predates the use case there of the application of said technology to mapping out the human brain. That was a later project, but actually
Hmm.
it was our the U.S. military was the one who actually worked with MIT to be able to create this technology for multi-parallel processing, or MP3, which was a strange acronym to use in 2007-8 timeframe, since we were post MP3s of like what was on our iPods and all those fun things. But um, anyway, the long story short of all that stuff is that's where it all started, because we were especially in those mid 2000s, and even today we're still concerned with Moore's law and the fact that we're reaching certain physical limits that necessitate innovation to be able to maintain Moore's law in terms of computing. Um, so even then,
Right.
as we are now, the idea was parallel processing, which is still very challenging, but we're better at it now than we were when we first started there. And it wasn't the first effort, because some of the first efforts go all the way back to the vacuum tube based machines and mainframes. A lot of what was ultimately getting time on terminals, so to speak, was to calculate you know some of the shared problems of the day, whether they were for military purposes or civilian purposes, and what led to eventually ARPANET, and research networks, in the 70s. So, this has been something that we've been after for quite some time in terms of like the application of, what we need computing power to do something, quote unquote. And so specifically to proof of work versus proof of value. So the proof of work part comes back to, it's effectively like the simple thing of like proof of work. So when you're in math class, and you got to show me your market work of how you got to the answer for your math problem when you start algebra, and you actually have to show like a plus b equals c. Okay, well, a equals 3, b equals 4, c equals 7. Or
Yeah.
or whatever they teach in Common Core these days, which probably isn't what I just said.
Nah.
But the point being is like you have to show that work, and through showing that work, there's the value in that work that's done. And so that's even to a
That's
certain extent.
really interesting. I love that analogy. That was great, Askia, of showing the work on a math problem in order to get credit for the problem. That
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 that's exactly what we're doing with Bitcoin, is
I
by
know that
solving these
helped me
harder and harder problems.
that helped
Right?
me so
Right.
much. That helped me
And so
so much.
relative to the halvening, which is this is the fourth one now. So now if I go do all that work, instead of getting full credit, I now get half credit. And so as we asymptotically approach and eventually hit 21 million Bitcoins, which is the most Bitcoins that'll ever be created, and then effectively we'll fractionalize Bitcoin to be able to distribute it or to use it for various use cases and purposes, Satoshis, if you will, and stacking sats, if for those who are really into doing these things, which is you take these Satoshis and whatever free disposable income you have, go buy sats, or, then that's called stacking sats. And so you
Yep.
take these, or if you're familiar with the app Acorns, every time
Yep.
you buy something, take the little piece of change and put it into the savings account, you
Hmm.
know, and shavings
Yeah.
make a pile. That's another common phrase, but that's all proof of work. And then
Yeah.
proof of value is effectively saying there's that I see two parties that have done a transaction, and I'm as a third party, as a witness, as a government, as whoever, see that there is value in this transaction, and I validate that because this
Right.
transaction occurred and documented it. So it takes a lot less work to be the witness to a transaction than it does to actually prove, effectively the all the work that leads to that transaction for both the buyer and the seller. So that's why, that in terms of like the energy required, how much work does it take to watch somebody buy a candy bar at a store versus the work it takes to make said candy bar, to get it from all the raw materials wherever they were on Earth to ship to one or multiple manufacturing locations, and then eventually on a distribution truck going to a warehouse, which then eventually gets sold to, a wholesaler or a distributor, who then gets it to that gas station or that bodega, so you could go buy a Hershey candy bar.
It's
Really
incredible.
interesting. I mean, you want to talk about like logistics and
Yeah.
IBM and all these kind of fun
Reminds me
things.
of the famous essay by Henry Hazlitt, I Pencil. which let me see if I can throw that link to that in the chat because he's describing what you're talking about in terms of the interplay between supply chains and the governance that makes it possible, the agreements and the currency and cash flow and all of it. And oh, Leonard Red. I'm sorry, not Henry Hazlitt. Uh, but yeah, here's the link. Because yeah, people don't realize that modern life has an almost
We're completely abstracted from proof of work and proof of value, for that matter.
there's an astounding level of complexity that has been abstracted away.
Well, I mean, that's a big part of
Which,
simplification.
that's what civilization is, but it would be nice if we taught people to appreciate the value of it.
Well, that's the hard part, is that the current teachers, if you will, or influencers aren't really, I mean, we're artificially placing value. My personal opinion is that we've artificially placed value in things that inherently don't have value.
Right. And that is that's the enduring criticism or skepticism towards cryptocurrency as well, because um, you know, a government fiat currency has plenty of disadvantages, but depending on the government, it can work. Whereas, a gold standard backed currency, that somebody pulled gold out of the ground. Gold has industrial and artistic uses, if nothing else, and it also looks cool. And if you think that the exchange rate, if you think the currency can't be redeemable against the gold, you make a speculative attack against the currency, and it works. Or doesn't, but the system works, what I mean. Whereas Bitcoin, on the other hand, like there was a transmutation of physical capital into the creation of the currency. Yes, there were prime numbers that were calculated or however it works. But at the same time, the accounting of value through the transmutation of labor, that concept should start to sound suspiciously like it comes from the school of economics that doesn't work so well. Starts with an M. And so that's problematic. Like I spent some cycles when this all started. I was like, what would be a fair way to calculate the book value of a Bitcoin? And the compute seemed like a good place to start until I realized that, you know, the value of it really depends on the direction it's pointed in. And so it goes in that line of questioning went in a circle.
We talk a lot about Bitcoin. What about NFTs? Now that's been really interesting what's going on over there, because people are trying to unload their stoned ape drawing
Bored ape, stoned ape,
board.
all
Yeah,
the
what?
ape derivatives.
Yeah, it's like worth nothing. Do you know about that, Alex?
Is that the same? Is is the fact that there are now Bored Ape NFTs, is that the same? Is that connected to the same brand Bape that was big when we were kids? Because
Curious George.
that would be really amusing, because I feel like the origin of Bape, the fashion brand, was from a Japanese proverb that was like making fun of the willingness of the kids to make a trend out of anything.
Are you talking
And
about like Prime? Do you remember?
no, I'm talking here, Bape. Uh Clothing
So
brand.
so while he's looking for that, so NFT,
Mhm.
non-fungible token.
Yeah.
To shortcut that, do you have something that's one of one or unique? In theory, we're all non-fungible, as humans, each one of us with our own genetic code, sequenced out in a text file, if you
Well,
will.
I think that was the interesting use case behind NFTs. And say for instance, you wanted to pay a toll with a NFT. There are some use cases to where you could have a government issued ID that could be an NFT. There are real world use cases. But again, this market is so volatile, right? That people lose faith in the technology very quickly. And I think that's a trend that I've seen lately in technology is the great turnoff, right? People are getting sick of tech too, right? And I know I'm trying to do it. I'm a big tech adopter and I'm addicted to YouTube Shorts, and I'm trying to like limit myself time with YouTube Shorts now, just because I've noticed a trend. And people that I talk to, they're, I've been online in my career for 20 years, online
Mhm.
around the clock. And it has reprogrammed my brain in many ways, good, bad, and different. But like Askia, you kind of came from the same pedigree that I did as far as working in the reseller. I'd have all my different distributors' websites open to be checking a price at any given time, right? So my web is just constantly open. And now I'm a little turned off by it, right? Like I try to limit limit how much time I spend online and turn off my computer when I can tell I've been spending too much time on it, right? I don't know if that's something that you guys do consciously, but I have been doing that lately.
I think that's a good mindful practice. And a lot of the erstwhile heroes of the tech industry over the past two generations have come to a similar conclusion. So, that makes good sense.
Skia, how
It's
much
oh, good.
non-screen time do you get per day?
I don't know. It's not something I track, but my phone certainly thinks it tracks it, and it's horribly off in terms of
Really?
like, yeah. I mean, it tells me every Sunday while I'm in church that like, oh, you use your phone 3 hours more or less or whatever, and I'm like, oh, thanks for the alert. Not really. Like, no. And
Yeah,
the
mine does
reason
that
for
as well.
and so like you guys have shared sentiments, there's pros and cons to all this stuff, and I couldn't even imagine having to, you know, do. I mean, I've got four different companies, and like a household to manage, and people, and all that stuff. Like technology enables all that to be possible
It
for me
does.
for me to sit here in my
Yes.
basement in Missouri and do that.
Mm,
I couldn't even imagine like trying to do all this stuff at the speed, at the pace, that I do it at with with any kind of effectiveness or efficiency.
That's a
Um,
good point.
so so there's
mm.
but then again, like I'm also addicted to YouTube Shorts, and I do stay
Right.
addicted because I will doom scroll, and the only thing that
Mm,
usually breaks my doom scroll loops is just what I'll call sugar content,
mm,
stuff
mm,
that
mm, mm.
like because like I only like certain types of sugar, you know,
Mm.
Right.
Well, I'll say a
Well,
human
a lot of
being.
it.
or good either guy.
Yeah, go ahead, Wes.
This real quick. I was just saying that usually what snaps me out is another human being saying, "Hey, do you want to talk?" Or you need to go help your son, or you need to finish your meal. um it's like that, come back to reality. The feed your body, take care of your family, all these other things. And that's where I think can become a distraction. And that's the only part that I'm talking about, because the ski, I think you made an excellent point, is technology has enabled us to live this lifestyle, right? It's given us a lot of benefit too. um and I'm curious what you have
Yeah.
to say, Alex.
Well, just that I think for there are two things at play here that the smartphone has kind of visited upon human culture. One, um, the Sherlock Holmes sort of effect, where, if we stay true to the source text of Sherlock, we know that he was too smart for his own good and chronically bored, and more or less would only solve cases that were more interesting than literally doing drugs. So replace drugs with doom scrolling and solving crimes with, whatever projects, suit your fancy. And I think that's a lot of the phenomenon. And the other one, which is also near and dear to my heart, is I guess it's more along the lines of Brave New World. But not exactly. because for me, I mean, over the course of publishing this content from now until whenever, we're all the viewers are going to get to know each of us. And for me, spiritual work and mental health are a significant part of how I approach things because it needs to be or else it goes badly. And so one of the things I struggle with is anxiety. And with that, um, a good, well, an effective, but ultimately not beneficial interim cure for anxiety is distraction. And these things have got to be the most distracting devices ever created, intentionally, but the fact remains. And so that's kind of the other half of it.
So I'll throw some, flex my biology here. So I mean, because that's what we're talking about at the end of the day is, your humanity, if you will,
Mm.
both the physical hardware parts of it, the spiritual, emotional, um, and mental parts of it. The four parts of it, if you will. And so, um, for those who care to go into why they're so addictive, it's chemicals. The reward
Mhm.
centers of our brain. You may hear it that way. If you want to get nerdy about it, you start talking about dopamine levels. Um,
Yep.
Hmm.
you really get like super into it, and you talk about the flow of these things versus not having the flow, let alone the receptors, whether you have them or not, or in certain quantities or not. Um, but the fact of the matter is that all these different things we do have various rewards. you know Otherwise we wouldn't do them, we wouldn't eat, we wouldn't like meet each other, hang out or whatnot. And you probably hear it, like, to draw another correlation, there's people who refresh you and there's people who take your energy. you know and so I look forward to our calls because I get refreshed. I don't get enough of this. I
Mhm.
need to have these conversations about random topics, and or on topic or off topic with people that I respect and want to interact with. It really helps me. You know, the antithesis to this is when I oh, man, let me pause that thread, because those are
Hmm.
some of the negative rewards of life. And ultimately then it's the part of like modulation, if you will, moderation and modulation. With two concepts which are worth their own stream, but related to whether it's crypto, or whether it's taking care of yourself and from a layer one standpoint. um, all these things kind of tie together and integrate into one, awareness. Am I even aware that these things are happening to me? And then
Yeah.
two, if I'm aware of them, well, what are how do I either so it's basically awareness and then the decision. You can break all this down to awareness and then decision. The decision to either continue doom scrolling because I might get to the good get to the good content that that actually enriches my life when I doom scroll YouTube shorts. And if I've trained the algo properly, then in theory I should get effectively these video flashcards that teach me about any topic that I want to learn in a shorter than Gladwell's 10,000 hours time frame. And that's the way my brain works. And I flex that power and that muscle to learn as much as I can as quickly as I can. But the other side of it is when I do have something to get done and I'd rather be doom scrolling, I don't know, fishing videos because, I'd rather be out on the water, tossing a line. But instead of doing that, I'm watching other people do that. Well, that sucks.
Right,
So
for
how do I
sure.
how do I pattern interrupt myself, or do I have to wait for the environment to do it for me? And do I even have the awareness to know that I'm stuck in a zero loop? You know,
It's
that's
something we're all
sugar effect.
struggling with.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I think it's something that just being aware of it is probably all you can really do right now. Is just because I appreciate how you were giving yourself a little grace there, Askia, just because it is a human instinct, uh, you know, natural thing that you can't help to be addicted to dopamine, right? Like that's me too, right? I share that same addiction to dopamine and always looking for that, killer content, if you will, that video that excites you because quite frankly, this is what my point is like I've been on the internet for so long that the excitement has become depleted or diminished over time because I'm always looking for that dopamine thrill, right? Now I'm not getting down into some bad categories because I simply all it takes is for me to watch public freak out on Reddit for 20 minutes, and then I realize, wow, like this is really negative content. You need to disengage. But that comes from experience, right? That comes from knowing how my own mind works with some of those things that I've seen. I've become responsible with the internet usage, whereas kids don't have that. They don't have that filter. They don't have enough experience in the real world to know the wrong and right way to treat people, so they don't have that filter of like what the content that they're watching is morally objectionable because they're not being raised by their parents to know that it's wrong. They're not being told by society that it's wrong. They're just being fed a constant stream of negativity. But we have, I think, a responsibility to let people know that like that is the internet. That's just a small portion of people. People are actually really friendly in America. People are actually not as racist as you think. Or maybe they are. Maybe exactly. Maybe they are, right? Because I'm coming from my perspective. I'm a white guy, right? And so I don't feel the same way that you guys do. And I think that's important for us to explain each self to each other, right? Because I love you guys, and I just I spoke from my own experience, and I hope to learn more um through these conversations, you know?
No, it's I mean, the reaction is because I'll shortcut it. Being the biggest, most athletic, smartest black guy, in most rooms, let alone like you take all those labels off and of the coloration or the racialization or the ethnicity part, and then it's like, yeah, I'm just the best in a lot of situations, which is why things are called alpha ball around these parts. Because there's a certain mindset that I've developed of coming from that background and perspective, and that mindset is helpful in a lot of scenarios, but it also hurts in a lot of scenarios. And that's for to your point, Wes, like the experience of discernment based on reflection and comes into play with all those things. It's really, really helpful to have an alpha baller mindset when you're trying to play basketball at high levels. you know, it's March Madness right now. It's me versus this other individual is the nicest way I could put it that way. Um, or
Well,
even just like Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul. Like
he's
I
out.
don't, if I don't come with an alpha baller mindset, I'm gonna get knocked out, and I might have my
Yeah.
children eaten.
Oh
I don't
no.
want any of those things.
Don't eat my
What's
kids,
cra
Mike.
What's crazy though is that there could even be value on Jake Paul if the line goes high enough.
Oh, it will. I mean,
Well,
you know, I,
yes, it's the house's job to create a line that gives the perception of value on both sides so that they make their payout either way, collect the vig and are fine. But
so that so that's
I
the
digress.
modulation piece that, and digressing into that, because like there's parallels to this in the crypto side of it too, because one of the concepts of where blockchain and crypto may be applied next is to the social credit score. So for
Mm,
and I'll call out Facebook. So for the Facebooks or the YouTubes or whoever that decide to doom scroll and you use their algos that get positively and or negatively reinforced that create
mm,
these doom scroll sessions that constantly radicalize people and various topics further and further away from truth or reason or any of these things. Well, I mean, there's some merit to the thought that like, yeah, there should be some sort of modulus to be able to prevent that from happening. At the same time, it's like, well, now we're talking about like, taking away freedom of will. I have a personal problem with that. And then at the same time, it's
yeah.
like, well, but at the same time, like, how can I help someone who obviously can't help themselves? Or then of course there's the hood part of me is like, nah, he effed himself up. You know,
Right.
you jumped in that lake full of gators, you snack. Like
Yeah.
it's a challenging concept. It's an intentionally slippery slope of all these different things, especially when you integrate the concepts and realize that like it comes back to awareness and then decisions. So those two things in terms of like this human existence are critical because that's what we're boiled down to. That's why we have a left brain and a right brain, so that we can be aware of ourselves and then basically make the decisions of, fight or flight, eat or don't eat, or day trade Bitcoin or whatever.
Well, guys, I think we've run out of time, and it's been a great discussion this week, and I really appreciate the sentiment, and we'll see everybody next week. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
Sounds
Looking forward
good. Looking forward to it. Well, wow.
to it. I know.
We just said the exact same thing.
Flown out, right? Yeah.
All right,
So much
guys.
for humanity. Oh wait, that's a mirroring thing too.
Talk to you next
Indeed.
week.
All right.
right, see you
Thanks
guys.
very much.